Very good. Assemblymember Alejo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to put this in context also with the report that was released yesterday at the national level, the 21st Century Policing Task Force that our president commented on, but also gave, I think the first time looked at a national picture of the use of technology and these body cameras. And I think on the Rialto has their numbers and their research, but yesterday's report also pointed out nationally that with the use of body cameras, 88% fewer incidents of use of force incidents and 59% reduction in the complaints against officers from that report. It made 59 recommendations, but I commend the police departments that have taken leadership in implementing the technology, because it's really helped inform other departments that have recently followed your leadership, including the city of Salinas and Greenfield, and several other departments have told me that they're willing to implement it, but as long as you got the money to do that. And we've had a lot of discussions among legislators. The discussion this year is, are we truly committed to providing resources to police departments to buy the technology and to store for storage, which is even more costly than just buying the cameras themselves. But I think it's important having these hearings, because departments and police chiefs have said we're willing to try this, implement it, learning from a lot of the lessons in terms of how how do you deal with issues like the Public Records Act and other privacy issues. But I think it's helped. And this is where it's going. I think body cameras will be a standard part of policing in future years. But as we have police chiefs and police departments who are willing to implement the technology, I think it's incumbent upon us as legislators to provide the resources to make that happen, from what I understand. So that's all I wanted to comment on, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions from the Assembly members?
I just have a comment.
Yes.
I hope everybody understands that there is a mutual benefit both to the officer and to the public at large. We are the partners that are naturally supposed to be aligned together, but there are some very serious concerns, and I think that before we implement, that we need to carefully consider the impacts of each one of these considerations, because the public deserves it, the officers deserve it, and we have a responsibility to carefully examine these facts before we move forward. And I think that this hearing has brought to light some of those concerns, and I look forward to us making very, very valuable decisions that will benefit us all.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Thank you very much, Chiefs and Mr. Ali Khan. It is you illuminated a lot for us here and gave us a lot to think about, and this will be influencing what we do with the legislation that comes forward. So thank you all again. Really appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our second panel is due for about 15 minutes. It'll explore how footage from body cameras can be used to develop policies and effective training within police departments. Our speaker is Professor Jennifer Eberhardt. She's a social psychologist from Stanford University. She's currently conducting a study on how to improve policing through review of body camera footage from the Oakland Police Department. Professor, thank you very much for being here. And if you can keep your testimony to about 7 or 8 minutes, and we'll also have time for questions from the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today to offer testimony. As you said, my name is Jennifer Eberhardt. I'm a social psychologist and faculty member at Stanford University. For 2 decades, my research has focused on issues of racial bias and stereotyping, especially in the criminal justice context. I've used social scientific methods to examine the sorts of problems that arise at the intersection of race, crime, and policing. I've convened conferences and other meetings to bridge the gap between academic researchers and law enforcement agencies. Currently, I'm assisting the Oakland Police Department as a subject matter expert in their reform efforts. I'm a member of the monitoring team charged with overseeing the reform of the New York City Police Department. I also serve on the advisory board of the National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice. Without a doubt, there is significant mistrust between the police and the communities of color they serve. In my brief testimony today, I'd like to offer some thoughts on how we might use technology and, in particular, body-worn cameras to improve police-community relations. Community members want the police to wear the cameras to increase transparency and accountability. Many police officers want to wear them to protect themselves from unfair accusations and lawsuits. As was mentioned earlier, there is preliminary evidence that body cameras can produce positive outcomes. In a handful of studies, researchers have found that citizen complaints plummet when police officers turn the cameras on. Also, when the cameras are present, officers are less likely to use force in their interactions with the public. As beneficial as the mere presence of the cameras may be, I recommend that we leverage this technology more effectively. Despite the growing support for body cameras, no researchers or law enforcement agencies, as far as I know, have systematically examined the mass footage produced from these cameras. Instead, people tend to look at one video at a time to determine who was right or who was wrong in a particular case. The vast majority of the footage is never examined. Yet the camera footage could provide unparalleled insight into police officers' interactions with community members. The footage could be used for at least 4 different purposes, all of which are fundamental to improving police-community relations. So these are training evaluation, policy evaluation, and the development of early warning systems. So first, let's talk about training. By analyzing large numbers of routine police-community encounters, we could test whether the interactions that police officers are having with black citizens, for example, are different from the interactions they're having with white citizens. We could gain insight into other crucial questions. What leads interactions to escalate? Why do interactions go wrong? What are effective strategies police officers can use to de-escalate when things get heated? Although it takes extraordinary skill on the part of officers to avoid escalating a delicate situation, typically we don't give much attention to these instances where things go right. Body cameras can allow us to do so. They can enable law enforcement agencies to model best practices, which they can then use both for new recruits and for in-service training. Video footage could be used to evaluate training. We could examine footage pre- and post-training to assess the degree to which the training affected police-community interactions. So, for example, the footage could be used to offer new metrics for evaluating implicit bias training, a type of training that agencies and community members alike are now eager to embrace. Rather than relying on self-reported changes in attitudes as a result of training like this, we could examine directly the interactions that the training would be designed to influence. Many law enforcement agencies are beginning to adopt procedural justice training in an effort to increase police legitimacy. Body camera footage could be used to compare interactions of the officers who've gone through this procedural justice training with those who have not. Are there aspects of the training that are harder to translate into actual street encounters than others? And if this is the case, this information could be fed back to the researchers, and they could use that information to fine-tune the training. In addition, analyzing the footage over time could provide law enforcement agencies with information on how long the effects of a training might last. So from this, they could make better decisions about how often the training is needed, ensuring that they continue to get the benefits of the training and use funds for additional training only when necessary. So this could potentially save tens of thousands of dollars per agency. The video footage could be used to evaluate changes in policy. For example, if officers are required to explicitly inform members of the public of their right to refuse a search, analysis of the footage may determine how often officers are in compliance with this change, as well as it would allow us to look at the effect that this change seems to be having on the number of searches, the outcome of the search, the quality of the interaction, and police-community relations more generally. This information could be fed back to command staff so they could make adjustments to the rollout of the policy changes. And then once these changes are in place, analysis of the body camera footage would allow supervisors to determine if procedures continue to be followed. Finally, agencies could use the footage to develop early warning systems. Certain types of footage could be flagged routinely for additional inspection. And when events happen that shake the nation, like those in Ferguson or New York or Cleveland, they could look to these early warning systems to get an immediate read or pulse on how those events might reverberate in the day-to-day encounters police officers are having in other cities like Oakland or Sacramento or Los Angeles. With access to this information in real time, law enforcement agencies could quickly implement strategies designed to reduce police community tensions, and they could immediately assess the impact of those strategies. An agency could even begin to share those strategies with other agencies as tensions rise in their communities. Analysis of camera footage could allow agencies to respond proactively rather than in hindsight. So to conclude, both science and technology could be leveraged here to strengthen police-community relations. Systematic analysis of body camera footage could suggest strategies to reduce tension and to build trust. Just as agencies commonly use CompStat systems to make predictions about crime patterns and to determine strategies for arrests, so too could they use body camera footage to develop what I would call a video stat, a system where they could use to build community relations. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. You mentioned all the potential benefits. How far have you gotten in your work so far? Have you been able to view the videos? Do you see specific incidents there that would help in training the Oakland Police Department?
Right. We've begun to view the footage, but I don't have an analysis to report at the moment. We're just at the very beginning phases of it, so I'll keep you posted.
Well, when you're ready, I'm sure that we'd all like to hear it up here and try and understand what you've learned and how that can be of help. Other committee members with questions? Vice Chair Melendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming this morning and sharing your thoughts with us on how we could use this technology to improve the relationship between the community and law enforcement, because that is very critical. When I hear conversations like from my colleague, Assemblymember Alejo, who's had 5 very serious incidents in his small community, that's of great concern to me. So when you suggest that you could use that footage to determine where the problem is, I hear you loud and clear, and I think most people in here would say that's a pretty common sense approach. I would just I would ask that we all remember what the goal is and work together to make sure we're not getting too far off the track in what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think you have that goal in mind too. But I wonder if maybe the suggestions that you have, the cost might be prohibitive.
I don't know that it would be. I feel like some of this could be automated eventually. Right now, like I said, we're at the very beginning stages of it, so we're not quite sure we're in the process of developing the metrics. And so, but once that is developed, some of it could be automated. There are also techniques that we use in social psychology called thin slicing, where you don't need to watch an entire video to get the gist of what's happening. So you get little snippets, or like maybe 10-second snippets, and you can just look at those and analyze those snippets on various measures. So there are ways around, I believe, the cost, and hopefully we'll move in that direction quickly.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, and I would agree with you that there's certainly some value that can be taken from this video and analyzing it. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assemblymember Jones Sawyer.
Hi, Professor Eberhardt. Actually, one of the things I'm looking forward to with the body cameras is this whole thing of training. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times you need immediate response from your supervisor so you can make adjustments. And when I've talked to several of the police unions, they also don't want this same footage to be used in a disciplinary manner. Mm-hmm. And so there's back and forth, the yin and yang between, what do you use to help people correct their behavior, mm-hmm. especially if behavior that they were trained in or their partner told them was the best way, or right. It's kind of what the department does versus what is the right way or the new way that right. you now. And so you're the social psychiatrist. What is a good mix of making sure that you change behavior, to where you get to a point where they're maybe not getting the message, and you really may have to do some harsher treatments to them to make sure that they are behaving, which may ultimately lead to an officer being suspended or ultimately expelled from the force. But you get what I'm saying? You
Right, I
want to
get
do
it.
both.
Yeah, and you don't want it to be all punitive, and that's what I think the beauty of looking at the footage in aggregate is. I mean, so you're looking for patterns across many similar encounters, and you're trying to discern, well, you know, what's going right, what's going wrong, and then you can, if you notice issues where you know, there's certain triggers, say, for escalation, you can look at that in the aggregate and then train on that by using footage from single cases where people get it right. And so you can look to sort of favorable clips to train on best practices from there. But I agree, you don't want it to be punitive, but at the same time, you want to be able to get the benefit of the footage to actually improve training and improve practice.
Thank you. Assemblymember Alejo.
Yes, Professor Eberhardt, thank you for being here today. I think as legislators, we make more informed decisions when we hear from our people who are in the field, our police officers and police chiefs, but certainly also bringing in our scholars who are doing research and being able to see what are the best practices as technology becomes more of a standard part of everything we do, not just police work. But here's some real issues that I think police departments are dealing with, and as we saw at the earlier panel, each having different policies regarding Public Records Act requests and trying to balance the interest coming from a police officer's point of view and also the public's point of view and access to some information. I don't know if you have any suggestions of what are some of those policies that might that are the best practices but might have that balance in terms of dealing with specifically the Public Records Act part of it. Because I think as policymakers, I think we also want to encourage police departments to utilize technology, especially if it has promising results, as we've seen in some of the early research done on it. Right. But at the same time, we have to, as we do in many legislation, is trying to find a balance between these different interests.
Yeah, I think one approach could be just the automation. So you're not you know, looking at you know, single pieces of footage and going from there where, you know, there could be you know, a privacy issue there. So if you have an analysis that's automated, then basically you have, you know, a machine that's going through and looking for certain signals. So you could you know, have a machine that would you know, be able to recognize certain words that are associated with, say, courtesy, respect, politeness, or words associated with hostility or disrespect, and that, you know, that footage then could be flagged for additional inspection. You know, you could also look for certain phrases that could trigger escalation, you know, in an interaction. So just, you know, the phrase, "Are you on probation or parole?" for example, you know, does, you know, stating that on the part of the officer in an interaction, does that change the nature of the interaction? So all that information, I think, would be beneficial to have, and you can get that information to some extent, all of the things that I just listed there through a more automated analysis where you have fewer concerns about privacy issues. There's also technology to blur faces, so you can use that to protect the identity of the people who are on the video clip.
Thank you, Professor Eberhardt. We'll now go on to the third panel. That panel is going to focus on balancing the interests of transparency with those of privacy of both the public and the police officers, certainly something we've already heard a fair amount about today. The speakers on this panel are, first of all, Peter Bibbring of the ACLU, which Peter Bibbring is right there, all right, with the dark beard. Next is Gary Ingemundson of the Los Angeles Police Protective League. Gary with the wonderful mustache. And then finally, Edward Fishman, representing PORAC, the PORAC attorney. Thank you. So first of all, let me, does anyone particularly want to go first? Gary, fine.
Thank you. My name is Gary Ingemunson. I've spent 25 years as a Los Angeles police officer. I then retired and I did 25 years more representing officers in uses of force for the Los Angeles Police Protective League. I've personally handled or been involved in handling over 500 uses of force. We are in favor of body-worn cameras when they are accompanied by fair and responsible rules. I was impressed earlier by Chief Farrar's testimony. I have reviewed the Rialto policy, and it's a well-thought-out, fair policy, and I don't doubt that it has the support of his officers. And having the support of the officers is, I believe, critical in any body policy that's going to be developed. Sunday, you may have read LAPD had a controversial officer-involved shooting. It made YouTube, but it also involved 2 body-worn cameras. I am confident that they will significantly add to the accuracy of the investigation. They can put you in the middle of the incident. You can feel the officer's fear, and I'm told that you will have goosebumps if you listen to the recordings. Body-worn cameras are an important tool for accuracy. I'd like to look at more of the street cops' view of the body-worn cameras, which is more of my expertise. In officer access, prior to writing reports and giving interviews, accuracy is law enforcement's most important product. People go to prison, civil suits amounting to millions of dollars are lost or won. Thousands of decisions are made each day based on police investigations, reports, and testimony. Video is just another tool to help make reports, testimony, and interviews accurate. Officers should have a recognized right to be accurate. This is what the Community-Oriented Police Services Division of the U.S. Department of Justice came up with in their implementing a body-worn camera program. It says, and we support the fact that it says, officers should be permitted to review video footage of an incident in which they were involved prior to making a statement about the incident. Reviewing footage will help officers remember the incident more clearly, which leads to more accurate documentation of events. The goal is to find the truth, which is facilitated by letting officers have all possible evidence in the event. Auditing access from a police officer's point of view. We have an officer who was accused of an improper statement, not necessarily a popular officer. When the investigation came in, management pulled the last 146 stops that this officer made and examined them from an audit point of view. They were able to find one more improper comment, but they were also able to find various other small infractions of policy and eventually try to send him to a Board of Rights with a recommendation of termination. Perfection is impossible, and mistakes are inevitable. Unrestricted access to large databanks of video can be used for improper purposes. For instance, silencing whistleblowers, settling grudges from personal animosity, harming another person's career because you want their job. Minor mistakes can be found in anyone's record that can be accumulated, blown out of proportion, and used to destroy an officer's career. Review of video recordings to prove or disprove a citizen's specific allegation should stick to the facts concerning the allegation and not be turned into a head-hunting expedition to find unrelated minor misconduct. Research has shown that memory is often flawed. Legislation should protect officers from charges of false statements just because memories do not match video recordings. Officers need to view the body-worn video as a tool to help them do their job, not as a tool of Big Brother to watch and criticize their every action. On the subject of public access to tactics, unfettered access to police video recordings by the public will make a knowledge of police tactics available to criminal elements in the society. Tactical footage should not be released to the public. Tragically, body-worn cameras will eventually record officers' violent death or serious injuries. These recordings should be restricted from release to prevent the traumatic effect they will have on an officer's family. We can all recall the domestic violence call that the officer was executed on by by the suspect that went on YouTube. Training accident. Incidents recorded are often valuable for other officers to watch for training purposes. However, certain recordings may be embarrassing to officers who have made mistakes and are now forced to watch those mistakes being shown to their peers at roll call. Permission from involved officers to use their incidents as training should be a requirement. Restriction of access for mistaken non-evidence recordings. Inevitably, it will happen that body-worn cameras will be accidentally left on when they should have been turned off, and things that should not have been recorded will be recorded. For instance, public bathrooms, conversations about confidential medical matters, private conversations about family members, fellow employees, or citizens, confidential informants, conversations that could put citizens in danger from criminals. Once recorded, body-worn camera systems do not allow alteration or erasure. There must be a system in place to remove non-evidentiary recordings from the system, possibly an outside entity with same-sex review if it's necessary to determine if a video should be removed from the system. Last of all, citizen privacy. Building rapport with the citizens in an officer's patrol area is of vital importance with accomplishing the police mission. Requirements to record every citizen contact will interfere with building that rapport. People will be reluctant to talk about the neighborhood if they are being recorded. People will be endangered. People's privacy and medical information may be compromised. Their family relationships may be exposed. Victim interviews in sensitive cases like rape and child molest will be impeded. Investigating actions such as strip searches will be embarrassing if recorded. And not to mention storage expense for millions of hours of video will be huge, and there's always the danger that systems will be hacked by outsiders. Currently, the Public Records Act legislation has a provision to protect officer safety. A provision should be added to protect a citizen's privacy. The Los Angeles Police Protective League generally supports the use of body-worn cameras as a valuable tool for law enforcement. However, it comes with many unexpected consequences. We urge the legislature to proceed thoughtfully and with care. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your excellent testimony. Mr. Fishman.
Thank you and good morning. PORAC has reviewed the matter very carefully and has culled a lot of information from around the state. As the PORAC Legal Defense Fund administrator, I'm responsible for essentially overseeing thousands of cases a year where officers are accused of misconduct. PORAC fully supports the use of body-worn cameras to be used and implemented responsibly. And as everybody has spoken before me has already described the key issues of what responsibly means. The concept of body-worn cameras is the greatest tool possible to provide transparency in policing to the street-level patrols that occur between law enforcement and its community. Body-worn cameras and other recording devices have been around for years. PORAC welcomes the influx of body-worn cameras to its membership. I'm going to turn to the responsible aspect as well. Again, an officer responding to a domestic violence call and seeing the victim bloodied, beaten, and bruised. That's captured on video. That should not be uploaded to YouTube that evening for the community to see. An officer doing a field interview of a child rape victim who's staring into the chest of this officer right into the camera, fearing reprisals and retribution. Rules need to be put into place as to when that camera can be turned off and when it's required to be turned on. A body-worn camera, just like any implement on the officer's Sam Brown belt, is a tool and should be used only following proper procedures put in place, training, and oversight. Taking these matters into consideration, PORAC has drafted potential legislation for this committee to consider. The first and most important is to cover and address privacy. I've heard speakers before me talk about an entire wholesale exclusion of the public's right to access videos that are recorded by body-worn cameras. PORAC is recommending a less broad-brush approach, recognizing that there needs to be a balance between the public's right to know, the public's right to have access, and the safety and the privacy of police and the citizens. The first concept is to add to the California Public Record Act an express provision declaring that audio or video recordings taken by law enforcement can constitute files of an active investigation, so they don't have to be released if they are truly an active investigation. The second suggested change is to add the word victims, as opposed to just any other persons for their safety. The third is to provide an absolute right of a department to not disclose audio or video recordings pursuant to Public Records Act request if either the safety or the privacy of any person would be jeopardized or compromised. In this way, the public still has the right to request, and unless there is the safety or the privacy of a victim or other person at issue and placed in jeopardy, that recording should be released to the public. The last aspect of privacy is that the death or serious bodily injury of any person that is depicted on a video recording should not be disclosed and should be exempt from disclosure under the Public Record Act. Other suggested changes offered by PORAC is a modification to POBAR to allow officers to have 5 days' notice before any video taken by them or of them is released to the public. PORAC reviewed the various concerns about when the recording should be turned on and turned off, what level of training should be had, what retention should be had, and we recognize that there may not be a one-size-fits-all answer at the state level. PORAC is then recommending that at the state level, the state require that any department or agency that is going to mandate or require the use of body-worn cameras for its officers must first meet and confer as to the impact with the rank-and-file police officer who will be wearing these devices and interacting with the public. At that local level, decisions such as when it should be used, the level of training, the type of review afterwards, whether it could be used for training purposes or discipline afterwards. At the local level, it is best addressed there, because what may be appropriate in Los Angeles County might not be the same as appropriate in Siskiyou County.